Welcome. So thanks. Welcome. Thanks very much for joining me tonight. It's going to be a really quick and fragrant run through some of the key issues that you raised with your tricky clients. I'm not going to apologise for missing loads out because the stories that you told me and the things that I want to share with you, they're the kind of things that are going to, take up much more of time than I'd anticipated. So, you told me some wonderful stories about clients who'd appeared in their underwear, or, friend had sent you a friend's request on Facebook, and it turned out that their feeds were nothing more than a racist diatribe. So I'm really hoping that the second half, where you can ask me some questions, will give you some time to get up to speed on the things that I missed out on. Basically, I'm trying to compress a 3-year social psychology course into 45 minutes, which is fun. It ended up probably being about 90 minutes anyway. So if you want to discuss all of your clients who don't have boundaries, that's fine. You can ask me questions at the end. But otherwise, make sure you grab yourself a warm drink and you're sitting somewhere comfortable. So I'm just going to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm Emma, and I've been heavily involved in shelter work and post-shelter work now for 8 years. Prior to that, I worked in a number of careers, but all of them have given me experience or training for turning the difficult clients into the dedicated ones. So from those tiny, minuscule battles of working up with classes of grumpy teenagers on Friday afternoons, right the way through to leading change with large multinationals, turning the difficult into the dedicated has been a bit of a life mission for me. And dare I say that I actually enjoy it. That's not to say I want you to send me all of your difficult clients. So before we start, I'd love for you to have a think about what you want out of the session. And you can add a comment in the chat box to say what you want most out of the session. If you could leave with one thing that would help you better with your human clients, what would it be? When I end the session, what is it that you hope that you're going to know? If you had one client solution, what would it be a solution to? And if you had one answer, what would the question it responds to be? So I'm going to do my best to respond as best I can to these as we go, but feel free to keep this dialogue open after the session if you don't feel like I really give you exactly what you need. So with your questions in mind and the concerns that you shared before the session, mostly about expectations, I think. So I'm going to talk quite a lot about expectations today. What I'd like to do is for you to be able to answer some of these questions by the end. And my objectives are fairly simple. Here's my objectives here. And they're questions today rather than statements. So I'd hope by the end of the session I'd be able to answer these questions a little better for yourself. So we're going to talk about that word compliance, what it means, where it fits within a compassionate approach to working with humans and their companions. Because it drives me a little bit crazy, I've got to say, when I hear people talking about consent and choice and cooperation and collaborative care, for instance, with animals, and then they're talking about pressuring humans into making decisions and then feel a little bit disappointed that humans haven't complied. So I'm going to introduce you as well to the shadow side. If you haven't heard this term before, I use it a lot. I love it. And we're going to discuss ways that we can harness the shadow side rather than letting it become an obstacle in our way. But don't worry, if you've never heard that term before, I'm going to explain it to you. We're also going to talk a little bit about effort and why it's sometimes lacking from our clients. And we're going to talk quite a lot about expectations and how we can manage expectations as well. Lots of you said you've got difficulties with clients who've got crazy expectations or who don't do what you suggest. So we're going to have a look at ways that we can manage expectations more usefully and how we can work with clients to create action plans that they actually implement without having to use force and coercion. So lots and lots and lots of trainer textbooks and academic papers even state that guardian compliance is often the difference between success and failure. It's a word that you're going to hear floating about a lot in the academic and training community, as if to say the client would have succeeded in everything if only they'd done exactly what they were told. It's always that magic ingredients, isn't it, that compliance. But how does that sit with us if we're working in collaborative and supportive ways rather than using coercion with individuals? Doing what you're told is right up there for me on the far side of the compliance spectrum, and I think this is not only an ethical reason but also a reason why our plans with clients also fail. After all, we're all intimate, aren't we, with the fallout of coercion? We all know about the resistance that it causes. We all know about the problems that it causes. The redirected aggression, the aggression directed towards us. We know that it also causes a distance between the client and us. So coercion is something that I really try to avoid when I'm working with clients. So I've always had trouble with this word. Compliance doesn't sit well with my aim of helping individuals change. So when we look at the dictionary definition of compliance, we can perhaps understand why it makes us so uncomfortable with its mention of submission and commands. So we want the client to be able to do just what we advise, but we don't want our advice to become a command. So just how do we get clients to do what's best? Part of moving away for me from compliance models is going to require a shift in mindset, and that may be a step too far for you today. That's fine. I think it's always, we're moving gradually, aren't we? It's a journey rather than a kind of like we wake up tomorrow and we can feel completely different. But I think it involves understanding the benefits, the flaws of the different models of helping people out. We're also going to look at some strategies to move away from compliance towards the end of the lesson to help us work in a more collaborative way with our clients. So essentially, when we're working to help or train people, there are three basic models that we can use, that we can select from. And we're probably going to need to use all three of these at some point. So there's not like one that's better than the other. And you may think that I'm going to be very heavy on the client-centered, and I am, because I think that's the one we use least. But at the same time, there are times and there are places that we're going to need to use the other ones as well. Okay, so the three models. It's especially true, by the way, if we're kind of stuck in using the doctor-patient models, as many behaviour consultants do, or whether we're working in the expert model, as many class trainers do. So the three models that we've got here are the doctor-patient model, the expert model, and the client-centred model. And we're going to look at some of the reasons why these models might make clients more difficult than they need to be. So the doctor-patient model will be very familiar. The client knows something is wrong, but they don't know what exactly, or they might suspect having had similar problems in the past that they know what's wrong. And what they want is a diagnosis of their specific problem, and then for you to provide a cure. So most of my clients come hoping for this model in lots of ways, and there are times when that's exactly what I'll give. My dog is doing this or that, what's wrong with them, how can I fix it? The client doesn't know what's wrong, they tell me the symptoms, I say your dog needs X, Y, Z, and here's your action plan, take 2 of these, call me in the morning, that kind of thing. And this feels very familiar to dog trainers and behaviour consultants if you're doing one-to-ones. And it follows the veterinary model as well, and it's the model most frequently used by veterinary behaviourists as well as by applied behaviour analysts. So the tensions of the doctor-patient model are also very familiar. You'll surely have had those clients who've nodded their head at you and then gone back home and done exactly what you advised them not to. You told them what the dog's problems were caused by doing this or that, and then you see them doing exactly this or that. I've had clients, one of my clients, she called me to say that a dog had bitten her. The problem was that she'd pulled a burr out of the dog when the dog wasn't suspecting it, and the combination of the surprise and the shock and the pain of having the thing ripped out of it, and the dog had also some problems with its skin, so a very delicate dog really. So the dog had turned around and bitten her, and it was my absolute, we're going to go to cooperative care models, you need to make sure that you're doing these things, but you can't do this anymore. And what happens 18 months later, she's done exactly that and is then kind of going, well, my dog's biting again. No, you're doing the same thing again. What did you do differently? So it can be very hard with the doctor-patient model because, you tell clients this caused it and don't do that, and then they go and do exactly that. So welcome to the life of a doctor and a vet. So, doctors who tell their diabetic clients to lose some weight, to eat more healthily, and then you see them chowing down in Pizza Hut on 7 different types of ice cream. Or, they tell the depressed clients to go and see a cognitive behaviour therapist, take some antidepressants, and then you see them down the pub drowning their sorrows, and never coming back for a refill, even though it's absolutely free. So doctors and vets are realising that the doctor-patient model gets very low compliance. And you might think that's easier for vets. Perhaps, let's ask vets how easy it is to stop people breeding dogs who've got genetic health problems, or to get their obese clients to lose some weight. I'd like to think that I'm a very compliant client for my vet. My dog has got seizure disorder and hip dysplasia, but the medications that he takes for these have got significant side effects from time to time. Just had one that I had to interrupt this very session for. Adding a dose of steroids into the mix turned him from a dog who I knew into, he was unrecognisable. He was like a different dog. He was hungry, grabby, snatchy. He was just a walking stomach on legs. That's all he could think about. And I went back to the vet, of course, and explained that this wasn't working. Was there anything else we could do? But how many people would just stop treatment if the side effects seem to do more harm than good, or you can't see them making any progress, or if the side effects have got that fallout? And my vet's getting much better at explaining to me why she's chosen the protocol that she has. So, for instance, when he started with seizures, she explained to me, I'm using phenobarbital because it's got the most studies on it. It's usually really reliable. It's the one that's the most effective straight away, and also it's cheap. So she explained to me why she was picking it, and then she said, you know, if it doesn't work, then we can do X, Y, and Z as well. So still a degree of I'm giving you this and this is why, rather than kind of which of these would suit you best, or which of these do you think would be best for your dog, which is fine. She's the expert. But you know, many vets are moving away from that kind of model there, and talking about the different choices that we've got. So when doctors don't let us know that there are alternatives and why we might use them, or why they pick that specific treatment rather than another, then we can sometimes be left with that kind of feeling that they only had one thing to recommend. And I remember the same vet actually with my old girl Flicker. She had urinary incontinence, and it got to the point where I just thought, this is, it's not normal. It wasn't all the time, but it was more regular, and it seemed to be when she was in pain. So I'd gone and said, is there anything we can do about this? Because she stank, you know. She wasn't comfortable, and she was always wet, and you know, starting to get burns, and it was just unpleasant. And we'd already been on one medication, and my vet hadn't explained to me that there were actually other medications that we could use that were more successful, maybe if this one didn't work, but they were also more expensive. And so her kind of trying to always get the best deal for her client kind of backfired, because I thought there were no other alternatives that we could pick from when that one wasn't working in the first place. So, you know, it sometimes can lead us to feel that there are no other alternatives and avoid us going back to the vet again anyway, or to the doctor. And we're still, you know, we're in the age of informed consent and also Dr. Google. So you can't wear the mantle of the expert and get compliance that way anymore. So the mantle of the expert is really threadbare these days. So we're in the age of post-truth, aren't we? Where politicians publicly demean scientists, and everyone with a smartphone has got, you know, is self-diagnosing and being manipulated also by crafty businesses who've got a vested financial interest in telling them what they're doing is idiocy. So, of course, you know, we've got three things going for us. We've got medication, we've got modification, we've got management. Those are our three things. And there isn't anything new in the world of dog training particularly. And yet, how many times has a new thing, a new commodity come out? And you know, there's a lot of noise in this crowded marketplace where it's hard to know who the real experts are anymore. So at the same time, we've got Dr. Google who's busy creating, you know, passionate anti-experts. We're living in the age of COVID, and I don't think there can be any more passionate anti-experts than we've got at the moment. And how many of us have got clients, for instance, who are convinced that their dog has got a brain lesion, or, you know, some kind of undiagnosed medical issue, despite the fact they've had MRI scans and they've spent thousands of pounds on tests. I've been that consultant where the client is telling me that I think it's this because I've seen it on Google, and I'm saying no, it's really not. It's just this, this, and this, and you know, it causes some tensions there. So there are many pathways to deal with uh, a diagnosis as well, and more of us are becoming more informed about that, as we should be, and therefore then some of our clients are then worrying about the side effects of the things that we're doing, or how effective it is and so on. So the doctor patient model is kind of like losing a bit of steam, and needs to maybe be supplemented by some of the other models as well. And I think that's sometimes a problem for us too, as trainers and behaviour consultants, that sometimes we're falling into the same trap where we're making a diagnosis, we're giving one recommendation, and we're not explaining, you know, the side effects of that recommendation, or the fact that that recommendation might not work for them, or it might not work in their particular circumstance, or that, you know, it's not for everybody. Certainly I see that with clients who've come with animals where they've used punishment, where nobody's explained to them the potential side effects of the methods that they'd used in the past, and nobody said, okay, well, actually, that you can use this and it may work, but also this is going to be maybe a consequence, and we don't know until you try it, which is one reason I don't use it. It's too 50-50 for me. And also time, busy vets and busy vet practices don't always have time to discuss options. The same with my GP, he just doesn't have time to say, well, we could do this. And the same for me. And it doesn't help clients choose the best pathway for our dog when we've not explained, for their dog, when we've not explained what the fallout might be. So the doctor-patient model as well is not very empowering. It means that your clients are always dependent on you for solutions. And what I want is a client who can take what I'm doing and apply it to all aspects of their life. I want clients who don't need me, actually. I'd like to be redundant. But the doctor-patient model is designed to create dependent clients who need you for everything. Though, to be honest, I'd rather that fallout than the fallout of seeing clients do whatever they had been advised not to. So in the end, we're left like Lucy from Peanuts, exasperated because we're right, frustrated because clients haven't listened, and cross at our clients who can't even seem to do the simplest thing as we suggest, even when it would be really, really easy to implement. Like, how hard is it to take a pill for depression, or to floss, or go on less challenging walks with your dog for 12 sodding weeks while they learn new skills? I had a client who phoned me, and she was upset because a new rescue dog was chewing things, and I said, okay, we'll put your shoes away in a cupboard. And it's the simplest thing. It would have taken her 5 minutes and maybe £5 for a box to put shoes in. But no, that was too challenging. And we'll talk about the reasons for that. I'm not saying that in a judgmental way. I'm just saying that the easiest solution of picking shoes up and putting them away just seemed to be impossibly hard, and we'll talk about why that's impossibly hard later. So often our frustrations of working with clients come because of the frustrations of the doctor-patient model itself. So we also work within the second model, the expert model. So this is a typical plumber or mechanic type model. The client has got a problem and they need a specific service. They've narrowed down what it is and they want us to either fix it for them or help them fix it. So when I ring a plumber for my sink tap, I don't expect him to do a full diagnosis, or, I'm telling him the problem is the tap. I want him to fix the tap. People who go to puppy class, they want expert advice and a person running the puppy class about puppies. They don't want, anything else. Clients who turn up for any of our bigger classes have self-diagnosed to a degree, so the expert model depends on accurate self-diagnosis. They think they need puppy classes, reactive rover classes, even agility classes, or heaven forbid, they think they need socialisation classes. And I'm sure you've had people whose dogs have been completely inappropriate for the class that you're running. So it's like me if I phone up the plumber and say, it's my tap, and he comes out and says, actually, it's nothing to do with your tap, it's you've got low pressure, it's to do with your boiler, or some other random thing I have no idea about plumbing, which is exactly why I don't know what's wrong. So groomers are another group of people who work in the expert service as well. I know what I want, and I want the groomer to supply it, and vets to a degree as well. So, for instance, I was just reading a post yesterday from the Fear-Free Pets movement about people who go in and ask the vets to declaw their cats. And the Fear-Free movement are now moving to, okay, well, that's not what you need and that's not what you want. And actually, the reason your cat is scratching stuff is because its cats need to do that, and declawing the cat is cruel and doesn't help them with those needs anyway. So we're moving that way as well, out of the expert model, in order to explain, okay, that's, you think this is the problem, but actually that's not the problem, rather than just doing exactly what the client asks, even if we don't, even if we know it's not going to work, or so on. So, no matter kind of our level of expertise, we're going to come across people who feel like they're more expert than we are, because they've read Dr. Google and they've seen it on Facebook and their friends have done it. And I'm sure I don't need to tell you the issues with this model, which is inaccurate diagnosis. It's not the tap, it's spoiler. Puppies who are adolescents or juveniles, or worse, actual adult dogs turning up for class. Reactive rovers who are just a menace to society. Agility dogs who've got hip dysplasia, or think, the agility clients who think that it will solve solve their dog's behaviour problems. I know people who've been kicked out of, they've taken the dog to agility thinking the dog needed more exercise, and the dog's really reactive to all of the dogs that are there, and then just been kicked out of agility class. Loads of clients like that. Grooming clients who want this type of cut or that type of cut, or have let the problem get so bad that it needs another solution altogether. So the expert model isn't perfect because it requires the client to diagnose, and usually that comes when there is a problem, or when they want a specific set of skills. The expert model, it also creates dependency as well, like the doctor-patient relationship. Sure, I don't want or need a plumber to teach me how to fix my own taps. I'm happy to pay them to do that for me, that's fine. But if it's likely to be a recurring problem or situation, it's quite useful to know at least a little bit in order to be able to troubleshoot. I like, if I take my dog to a groomer, I would like my groomer to be able to explain to me, okay, well, if you do this in between times, it's going to make it less difficult to do the groom when you arrive here. So maybe you could do this, or could you do a little bit of this in the meantime, so that they don't end up just a ball of knots, and the groomer has a really hard job sorting it out. So how many of us, for instance, have had to send our car back to the garage because the garage fixed the problem we said they had, and they didn't look for the underlying cause, or they haven't fixed a different problem that was blatantly there as well? So also Dr. Google and expert Google steps up, and it makes all kinds of things worse by trying to do a home fix because expert Google found them a shortcut and they found a clip on YouTube. So Facebook groups are literally filled with armchair experts, aren't they? There are times when we need to be the expert, but there are times when we also need to carry out behavior modification for the client, rather where we are doing that rather than doing it with the client, which perhaps is a better mode of working. And we also have to acknowledge that times have changed. I love this clip, by the way. Are you in that position where I am, where I can kind of barely go on most open access Facebook groups, where animal kind of conversations are involved? I've been called all sorts for caring about the welfare of animals. Called Karen, as if as if my concerns over animal welfare were just like outrageous, and I wanted to see the manager and all sorts. And I feel like sometimes playing that card, I am like Jessica Seymour here. I am actually an expert, and having to pull that. So how many times have you been challenged by some armchair expert who's watched one episode of The Dog Whisperer and now thinks that this is Milan? Have you been in that position where you felt, or like you wanted to say, I'm a highly qualified and respected professional dog trainer, Tom? So times have times have changed. So this tweet exchange between a professional propagandist and a constitutional lawyer just says it all. He thinks he's an expert, he's actually not. She's advising him something to help him with his expertise, and he ends up being really rude and arrogant to her, and she ends up having to say, I'm a constitutional lawyer. So even having a PhD these days, even being a constitutional lawyer these days, affords you no automatic guarantee of status and respect, especially in an anonymous world like Facebook. So even if you can say, I've got 3 PhDs and a lifetime of work in the field, Tom, the age that we're living in affords us much less power than it used to. Now that everybody has got access to Google, now that nobody bothers to check who you are and doesn't even seem to understand what QC means after your name and your blue tick means on Twitter, but we live in an age where people don't check who you are before they start slagging you off. And they also assume that in the expert model that you've got to be a Jessica Seymour to school a Tom Harwood. So expert models can fail where the client is actually better than you are or more capable. So what do you do when you're coaching a David Beckham or you're coaching a Serena Williams? Does that mean you've got to have achieved more than they have just to coach them in what they're doing? There can be an arrogance to the expert model that can be a real stumbling block for us, I think. We might not mean to come across as arrogant. No doubt that's what needled Tom Harwood about Jessica Seymour reaching, she recommended a documentary for him to watch, and it's obviously needled him. So, he assumed that was quite arrogant of her, or that that he didn't know why she was recommending this. So we're battling against egos, cultural constructs about masculinity, age, status, and also I don't think we should underestimate the power of knowledge status and the power that that gives us, and how we sometimes can be trying to use it. You know, I get to play the expert card because I'm experienced and old, and you know, the grey hairs, they give me status. My knowledge gives me status. Those the letters after my name give me status, and that allows me sometimes to use that as a lever, that I feel able to lock horns over expertise with clients who've got big old egos or they think they know better. But I don't feel comfortable having to get myself into some kind of pissing contest, knowledge-based pissing contest, just based on how much I know. Or the only reason that clients pay attention to what I'm saying is because I've forced them to submit to my superior knowledge. You know, has that worked for any professional who's got to work with people who might be older or of higher status or have got issues with their own ego? When I worked as a national education advisor, I was 33, and I had to go into people who'd regularly start the meeting by going, "I've been teaching more years than you've been alive." How was I supposed to answer those ancient old crones who'd said, you know, "I've been teaching 11,000 years. What's this egg you're teaching me to suck? You're asking me to suck, youngster." Part of me wanted to say, you know, if you've been teaching that long, why are you still so crap at it? I didn't, of course. But the problem is that the expert model, it fails us when our clients perceive us to have less status than they do, or when our knowledge isn't as actually as secure as their problem is, or can't overcome their problem. Then they start to doubt our expert knowledge. It also works on a kind of knowledge equals power paradigm that I'm not comfortable with that, and also it can make some of our clients very prickly. The worst is that the gentler we are, the less likely we are to have to pull out the kind of "I'm a constitutional lawyer" Tom card, and the more likely we are to see the side effects of the expert model in the modern age. So the expert model is often based on a power dynamic. We're attempting to use our knowledge as kind of like a lever for compliance. So as a consequence of the challenges of the doctor-patient model and the expert model, many people are now, including doctors, helpers, and therapists, are turning to client-centered models, and they're realizing that the traditional models are less effective and they've got a low rate of adherence. So client-centered models have got more adherence simply because you're working with the client rather than against them. So rather than doing it to or doing it for the client, we're doing it with the client. And sometimes the client's doing it on their own. So we're moving away from that do to and do for to a do with model. So these models facilitate learning and are seen as helping relationships that empower the client rather than this kind of traditional power imbalance where you're the one with the expertise or the white coat and the knowledge, you're the wise one and they're dependent on you. And instead of doing things to the client or doing things for them, we're working with. So it's more of a supportive process where at times you are going to step in. You know, it's not like you just only ever wear your client-centered mode or you only ever wear the expert mode. We choose different moments, don't we? Sometimes we're going to step in. But it's much more respectful of clients' lived experiences and of their own unique situation and individual worlds. So for that reason, it actually has more compliance, adherence, if you like, better, because it delivers what the client needs, because we're doing what they ask. That doesn't mean that it's some kind of weak model or we're just doing, you know, we're prostituting ourselves in order to our values, in order to deliver what the client wants. It doesn't mean that at all, but it does mean setting them up so that they're going to make better choices because we've informed them better. And it's not just a switch in mind frame, it's a lot more nuanced than that. So we're going to look at a little bit later in some detail at one client-centered approach that I use. Working with these models, it can be challenging sometimes when you just think, you know, it will be so easy, so much easier just to step in and just say, "Oh, for God's sake, just do this," where the client is just like completely overwhelmed. So the client-centered model can fail where the client is in a state of learned helplessness, where they haven't, where they've literally tried everything and they're exhausted and they can't see a way out. So a client-centered model where we're trying to help there and help them choose what's best for them can be really tough when they've got a history that's meant that they are just, you know, they can't make any choices. It's all too much. On the other hand, it's also very hard because we can then create a dependent model just by suggesting to those clients, okay, do this. We're not actually helping them out any more than we were if we were just kind of faffing around and saying, well, what do you want to do? Okay, so one of the reasons, one of the things I think that we really need to understand is why people can be so awkward, touchy, unreliable, unpredictable, rude, difficult, and why we can be too. So, in his book Thinking Fast and Slow, economist and psychologist Daniel Kahneman speculates that we have a dual processing kind of a brain. In the first system, he says that it's fast, it's instinctive, it's hardwired, it's unconscious, of course, it's automatic, it's emotional, and it's often innate, and it usually runs most of our behaviors and reactions just kind of automatically, without having to think about things. Um, that's the kind of the system that's going to take over when we're in under stress. The second system we've got is rational, it's cognitive, it's measured, it's controlled, it's reasoned, but it's also slower, hence thinking fast and slow. Social and cognitive psychologists are learning so much more. There's at least 3 papers every single day that are published. We're learning so much more about these two systems and how they function differently. Suffice to say that if your client is difficult, or worse, if you're difficult, it's usually Kahneman's instinctive system, system 1, that's in the driving seat. It's in the driving seat anyway, but at times of stress, it's always in the driving seat. Organizational psychologist Jared Egan calls this the shadow side, and the shadow side is much bigger than Kahneman's model. So Kahneman's model is about our own brain as an individual, whereas Jared Egan talks about, I don't know, the whole culture in which we exist, and it's much more expansive version of Kahneman. So Kahneman's system 1 would very much fit in the shadow side, as one of the things in the shadow side. So Egan explains that all things have got a side in the light, a visible kind of public side, and that also has everything that is visible, that's in the light, has also got a shadow side. It's often only glimpsed and usually is very private. And like Kahneman, we see a split between this kind of like dual processing way of thinking and behaving. We've got the rational, the logical, the overt. And Egan refers to the shadow side as irrational. I think this is an important distinction. It's not irrational because it doesn't follow rational processes. It's irrational. It's not irrational. Irrational would mean that it ran contrary to rational processes. But the shadow side is also those emotions. It's about our inner motivations and needs. It's also private though, but it will seep out into our actions. Isn't this funny? Because we're moving to that model in working with our clients that if we're working with the dog, we've got to deal with the emotional undercurrent. We've got to deal with the dog's motivation and the dog's needs. And if we don't do that, whatever trying to stick on the top, those kind of rational, the operant behaviors, it's just going to collapse because we haven't dealt with the emotional first. And it's exactly the same with people. So we know this, we've got this. So Egan also goes on to explain that when you've got you kind of these things, they can kind of seep out, but they're also cultural. So for instance, when you've got a 60-year-old male client who's resistant just because you suspect it's just because you're a younger woman, and when you're thinking about why people feel the need to master dogs, these are all shadow side issues. I live in France. It's a very macho kind of culture. I've had people at trade where we've been at association and charity fairs who've come up to ask me why we sterilise our male dogs, and who've actually asked me, "Are you sterilised?" Which I just it's part of when I'm kind of going, what an outrageous thing to say. Well, this is a shadow side. It's their culture seeping through this very macho kind of Latin culture and Catholic culture in lots of respects. That are kind of speaking for them, if you like. So when you're seeing these things, that's the shadow side. So we as trainers, we've got our system 1 and system 2, our over and our shadow side. And this transfers into our work too. I always give the example of when I was about 14 or 15, so that's kind of, my sexual maturity. My friend, her mother bred Labradors, and I went into her house, and she had a litter of quite oldish Labradors. I was going to say maybe about, I don't know, 6 or 7 months old, all bouncing everywhere. In my memory, there seemed to be about 9,000 of them, but they were all sniffing at my crotch and sniffing me, and very in tune to my changing hormonal status. And it horrified me because the only dogs I knew were really sweet, normal dogs who didn't sniff crotches and so on, and weren't overexcited by some teenage girl and her new hormones. And to the extent of, I still carry that with me a bit about Labradors, that I think they're a bit uncontrollable, a bit bonkers. And I have to say, I'm a Labrador person. I am that person. Greedy, like my food, quite fairly social, or likely to hump you in opportune moments. So I see those connections in me. But how many of us have got those prejudices? Like, I hear some trainers sometimes talking about, oh, I've got another cockapoo, or I've got a load of Labradoodles, and you can sense the disgust in their tone, from another Labradoodle. Or the same with rescue. I've heard trainers say, I won't work with rescue, and that really needles me because I obviously do. And then I'm going, well, that's my shadow side, it's that needling I'm feeling is my shadow side brushing up against their shadow side. And we hear, some trainers anti-pedigree or anti-flat-nosed dogs or anti-prick-eared dogs who won't work with shepherds. I've got one of my very good trainer friends just will not work with Malinois. She will not. She just says, I don't like them. I don't like their owners' attitudes. I don't like anything about that whole culture. And she just won't. Which is fine. She rings me up and passes them on to me. But we bring our prejudices as trainers. We make leaps without even knowing or understanding what's happening. We feel ourselves bristling, you know, just reading a message about the breed of the dog the owner's got. So how many of us are sitting there as soon as we get something from a they say, I've just rescued a dog, and you can feel your hackles rising. You can feel so bristling. So we need to be conscious of our shadow side too. We're not perfect. We are people just as our clients are. Our benefit is that we're working and we're in a sensible kind of, we can allow our system to brain, we can allow our overt side, the rational side, to take over because it's work. It's not a problem that we're living in. So we're brushing up against clients who are dominated by their shadow side, dominated by their system one thinking, just because they're living in a time of stress when it's really, really challenging, it's really difficult. So we need to know these things and recognize that they exist. That's the first step, is just knowing that they're there, knowing that they are. And then we need to know how to work them and how to manage them. So Kahneman suggests that the system one, often gets in first. Egan suggests that for most people, shadow side issues make up about 51% of what they do. Under pressure, though, our system ones, our shadow sides, they're the ones taking control 100% of what we do. So we tend to think of these biases, emotions, rational behaviours, cultural hang-ups as being obstacles, and they often can be unless we know how to work with them rather than against them. So we have them too. How many times when our client says that they want their fearful dog to become, cafe society dog, they want them to be super social butterflies, or they want them to be a dog park dog. How many times do you feel your fist clenching, your hackles rising, yourself bristling, your teeth gritting even? And when our clients are showing their full selves, their covert sides and their overt sides, are we the ones sometimes that are resisting and feeling that tension and holding our breath and letting our thoughts interrupt like bloody another cockapoo, and, getting in a way so that we're barely listening anymore to their story? So what about when a client says their dog is dominant? Do you feel your hackle rising then? I do. Or they arrive with like 50 types of shock and prong collar. I've had people arrive with 2 shock collars, a prong collar and a muzzle on the dog, and then kind of, right, and I feel myself blocking myself off from what they're going to say before they've even started to say anything. Do you feel your own barriers going up and your own shadow side colouring how you hear what the clients are saying? So Seth Godin makes a lovely point in This Is Marketing. So he says, when in doubt, assume that people will act according to their current irrational urges, ignoring information that runs counter to their beliefs, and most of all, being influenced by the culture that they identify with. I just love this quote. There's so much in it. It's so rich. Perhaps I change irrational to irrational in line with Jared Egan's thinking that it's not that it's running contrary to rationality. It's just that they march to their own drum. So I'll read it again. When in doubt, assume that people will act according to their current irrational urges, ignoring information that runs counter to their beliefs, trading long-term for short-term benefits, and most of all, being influenced by the culture that they identify with. So much in there. When in doubt. And that's when our clients arrive with us, isn't it? When they're in doubt. They don't know what to do anymore. That's why they're with us. That's the reason for their call. If they knew how to do it, they wouldn't be with us. And their current irrational urges, it's not that it's going to be like that forever. So clients are going to change. It's not like they're set in stone, but we tend to make judgments about them being like always like that, like they just, the person who arrives is just going to be always difficult or always irrational or always rude, when really it's just them in a moment because of the situation of doubt that they're in. And we've also got that little bit as well about trading long term for short term benefits. Oh, how I know this. I struggle all my adult life with my weight. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna lie about it. And you can see how uncomfortable I was. A little bit of displacement behaviour there. Making these confessions. What do I do when I'm in a situation of doubt? I go to the fridge. I trade those long term benefits of being healthy and feeling comfortable for the short term benefits of putting something in my mouth right there and then. When do I do that? Whenever I've had a crappy day, whenever something bad is happening, whenever I feel uncomfortable or a little bit anxious. And when also do I do it? When I'm rewarding myself, it's my celebration. Oh, what shall I do? I'll just eat cake. What's my solution to feeling bad? Just eat some cake. What shall I do when I'm feeling good? Just eat some cake. So we trade. So doubt doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It can be a good thing too. That marshmallow test. Our clients would fail a marshmallow test when they arrive in that moment of doubt, because they're in that period of tension, that period of stress. So whenever we've got conflict, tension, a little bit of change, system one, the shadow side, are going to take over. And there are literally textbooks and textbooks of information breaking down these irrational ways of thinking and behaving. But I think it helps me breathe easier knowing that we share these with our clients, and it does help me understand them a little better. We've all been there where we've been in conflict or crisis and we've made bad decisions. If you haven't, I have no idea why you are watching this, because you obviously know better than we are. We won't even have these problems. So there are pages and pages and pages of cognitive biases, and they're all fascinating. I love them. Because they're all just that. We like to think we've got free will. Oh, we so haven't. We're dominated by all of these really weird things. Our system one and shadow side thinking are all of these biases. So we've got optimism biases, which interfere a lot with what we do, and pessimism biases. Yes, we've got both. And the worst is going to be when our clients who've got an optimism bias run up against our pessimism bias and they clash. So we're going to have these clashes from time to time in our expectations and our views, and I'm going to talk more about these. We've got anchoring biases, where clients are primed by everything they see around them before they even get to us, meaning that nobody arrives objective anymore. And we've got confirmation biases, where they're just listening and looking for things that confirm what they already believe. We know this all the time. When you look for dominance, that's exactly what you're going to see. So we've got confirmation biases as well. If we find ourselves constantly dishing out the same advice, all we're doing is recommending things that have previously been reinforced. We're looking for our confirmation biases. It just confirms exactly what we thought before. There are framing effects and prospect theories, familiarity principles, and ostrich effects. You can imagine what that one is. Egocentric biases and logical fallacies. This egocentric bias, actually, I'm not going to talk about it a lot in the rest of the presentation, but when we're changing, when we are in a period of crisis or conflict or stress, when we're in that period of doubt that Seth Godin talked about before, we become more selfish. We just do. So if you've got clients who are struggling to even see things from the dog's perspective, it's just because they're stressed. It doesn't mean that they're selfish people or they're pigs all the time. It just means in that moment, that's what we do, is we think of ourselves. And it reminds me, I've suffered depression on and off for all of my adult life. Kind of goes with the weight loss and the weight gain, and these things they're not separate. But it reminded me of a time when I'd gone out to a social occasion. I'd really forced myself to go, and I didn't want to go, but I couldn't really get out of it, and I didn't want to be there. And I sat in the corner I felt so bad for myself, and I should not be I should not have been unmedicated at that point. But my mum and I had a really nasty conversation afterwards, because my mum was really cross at me. She said, "You're really selfish. You made everyone else there feel uncomfortable." And she was right. I was selfish. I couldn't see it at the time, but she was also selfish. You know, she was talking about what she felt, not what other people felt, because she felt uncomfortable by it all. We were both in that period of doubt, and we both got really selfish. And it's only now that I can kind of say, well, you know, you didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. We didn't. It wasn't a big thing. I've always been this way. That it's easy to see those egocentric biases in other people and kind of excuse them because you know that they exist because they're in a period of stress. So it's not who they are. It's not a permanent state of being. It's just that moment. And it just makes people feel, you know, that they can't move forward. So the egocentric bias, I think sometimes when we think our clients are doing the wrong things by their animals, or they've not got the animals' kind of best welfare at heart, quite often that's just because they're stressed. And then we've got hundreds of wonderful logical fallacies as well, which are amazing and crazy as well. And not only do our clients have them, well, we've got them. So how can we think more rationally about our clients more simply when there's so many things going on? So in 1953, Fritz Heider proposed a really simple common sense model. It's not an established psychological model, it's just like really common sense, naive epistemology kind of approach, about how we approach things. So he says there are intrinsic loci of control. So the intrinsic things are the ones that we are in control of ourselves, and they're the motivation side, exertion and intention. So you'll know this, that you've got clients who are not willing to put exertion is just effort. They're not willing to put any effort in it. They want change like snap, and their intentions. So they may have the very best intentions and haven't got a hope of in the world of being able to implement them because they're too busy, haven't got any time, they don't intend to dedicate any resources to it, so on. So we've got clients who have got problems with their motivation, their own intrinsic loci of control. And then we've also got clients who've got problems with their extrinsic loci of control. So these are things where we can help. We've been brought here to help out. So we're really talking about ability and environment. And if you think about it, when we're doing our work, that's what we're talking about. If we're helping our clients with their extrinsic loci of control, we're helping them with their ability. We're making them better dog trainers themselves. We're helping them help their dog. And that's what we're doing is we're increasing their ability to cope with their own situation. So we may be working on that side of things. We may also, if we do management, be helping them arrange and use their environment better. And that may be their house, but it may also be the things that they've got around them. So if you have ever recommended to a client who's got a dog who's got separation anxiety, that they if the dog is happy to have other people there, that they have a dog sitter in, then you're helping them get more control over their situation by manipulating their environment differently. So it's quite useful, I think, to think where are our clients lacking and where are they really strong. So quite often they might not have the ability yet. So we're going to be doing quite a lot of coaching and helping them get that ability. They may not have the right environment, so we might be suggesting things that will help them get a better environment. And we tend to think as trainers that we can only work on those extrinsic loci of control because we're not very good always at knowing how to help people manage their intentions. This is coming back to our management of expectations, and we're also not very good at helping them like motivate themselves and put more effort into it. So I think for me, as dog trainers and behaviour consultants, the exertion and intention side is the side where we need to be paying most attention. It's our weak spot because we're very good at telling people how to improve at their ability and manage their environments better, but we're actually not very good cheerleaders. We're not very good coaching people, changing their habits. We're also not very good at helping people set goals necessarily. So we tend to see ourselves operating on the right hand side, that we can increase training ability, we can make suggestions about how to manage the environment, but we can also work on intentions and exertion too. And that's where we fail because we don't always know how to be good coaches as well as good trainers. So let's take a deeper look at some of those expectations. Many of you said, all of you, I would say, no, not all, most, said that it was really hard to work with clients who've got ridiculous expectations. And a couple of examples were the people who've rescued a dog recently, and the dog is like cowering in a corner and shivering, and they want their dog to be like super social and really friendly. That's a key one. Or where people have just got like completely unrealistic expectations. They want their dog who is really aggressive towards people to be sitting in a cafe, letting the whole world go by. So we're going to take a little bit of a look at these expectations, because a lot of these are rooted in the optimism bias and this kind of system one bias that gets in the way here. So there are two ways that the optimism bias can affect us. One is that it makes us really poor at goal setting, and the other is that it interferes with our ability to make good judgments about risk. So, just to give you kind of like some examples here, um, you know this yourself. If I asked you, if I just put a jar in front of you, like one of those guess the weight jars, like guess how many sweets are in the jar, the first estimates are crap. They are really, really bad. People are wild guessing like three, I don't know, 3,000, three, I don't know. And the more naive we are, and the more of a novice we are, the worse our recommendations are, our estimates are going to be, because we haven't got a frame of reference, So, how many pounds does it take to build a bridge across a river? Well, I don't know. I've got a small frame of reference that Boris Johnson tried to build a bridge over the Thames and it was going to cost 50 million and it didn't get even built. So, I don't know. Maybe it will take that. I have no idea. How long will it take to complete this? I have no idea. Not a small, tiny remnant of ability to guess or estimate how much time it would take to be able to do this, how many people it would take, how much money it would take, how many resources it would take. Nothing, because I am a complete novice. I have no idea. So when my mechanic, when he changed the water bottle, and I'm kind of like thinking, I don't know, maybe that's an hour job. I don't even know how long that's supposed to take. And he's saying, no, I've got to do this and do this. It's going to take me 6 hours. What, to change a water bottle? That's ridiculous. I know, but the only way I can get to it is I've got to take the wheel off and go up, do this way. And okay. Because they're reframing my reference. So if when we ask our clients to make an estimate about where do you see your dog in the future, what do you think is possible for you to achieve, they're novices. They are going to make the most ridiculous guesses, because also you've put them on the spot. And it reminds me of a time I did a training exercise with a wonderful lady whose name I cannot remember. And all I can remember about her was she was lovely, and she was from Liverpool. And she'd done some work with Liverpool University. And she made us do this activity. Teachers don't mind doing these things, by the way. We secretly like them. So we had to throw a ball at our friend, and she'd ask us to say something like, "What's your name?" So you throw the ball, you say Emma. She'd throw the ball back to you and then say, "How old are you, Emma?" And you kind of like, "Oh shit!" And either you'd forget how old you were or drop the ball. And she'd ask us like harder and harder questions, like, "What's your mother's maiden name?" I'm pretty sure she wasn't trying to fish us for our passwords. But she was just going through these questions, like, well, taking us through some of the things that we might know for sure, like, give me a quote about Macbeth or something. And you kind of your rational brain, your thinking brain, your memory just collapses, because you're under cognitive stress, you're under cognitive load, and also you're on the spot. So when we're saying to clients, what do you want out of these sessions? What do you want to achieve? They're going to say wild and crazy things that are going to make us think that they're idiots, because we're putting them on the spot, just like that woman throwing the ball at us. We're just like, well, I don't know, and I'm also stressed, and we're in doubt. We're novices. We don't have a frame of reference. So we're going to talk about ways that we can improve that. But that's our first one, is that the optimism bias makes us say crazy things. And if you've ever watched any of those like home improvement shows, did they ever come in under budget? Has that ever happened? I read a story yesterday in the press about it was supposed to be a £700,000 renovation, and it cost 2.5 million in the end. And normally that's how I actually work with people's estimates. I normally estimate, okay, let's double it and double it again. So that's anywhere between 3 and 4 times more time that it will take, more costs it will involve, more manpower that it will involve. Um, that's my rule of thumb, is to take whatever people's estimates are and go, okay, let's triple it. Because that usually helps, and that was borne out yesterday. Confirmation bias. I now believe I'm right because I saw something in the paper that said 7 million. Well, that's roughly slightly more, 2.5 million, 700,000 to 2.5 million, and I'm going, that's roughly my theory about what estimates. Cash estimates is that it's going to cost us 3 times as much. So we've got all of those things at work about goal setting, and it makes us really bad at that. But the optimism bias also makes us think that statistics will not apply to us. Okay, so if we had a statistic that said this many boys out of 100, because we know boys from 5 to 9 get more likely to be bitten in a friend's yard by the friend's dog. So we know this. Um, and it usually happens where it's on the dog's territory. So I could have an app with a statistic. I could get an actuary to do that, and would have a number, and then I could say to clients, who've got boys who are 5 to 9, who have friends over. More importantly, it's very likely that one of your son's friends will be bitten because your dog has got territorial behaviours, and I'll be able to give them a number. And it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference because we never think that we will be that statistic. We never do. That's how the optimism bias just thinks, okay, well, them, but not us. Because it actually makes us think that we're better than the other people, and it's less likely to happen to us for all kinds of reasons. So it makes clients very bad at risk assessment until that thing happens to them. That can be hard as well. So under stress, this is going to just be absolutely worse, because our brain spits out nonsense when we're under pressure, and we're really bad at goal setting when we're doing it quickly, and we haven't got any frame of reference, and we think that we're never going to be a statistic. So we can help this by framing. So what framing means is that before you ask the client, what do you want to achieve, you know what their dog is. If their dog is cowering in the corner, and the reason why you are confident that they're going to make a bad estimate is because you know better, because you've done this before. So when their dog is cowering in the corner, you know that it's taken medication modification and management about 9 months to 18 months to see any progress. Okay, so say you know that with this kind of dog that you've worked with before, it's going to take X amount of time if the person really dedicates themselves to it. You also know that you've had clients who've had a similar kind of dog who's trembling in a corner, and they didn't do very much. Maybe they didn't go down the medication route, they did a little bit of modification and a lot of management because they just didn't have the same capacity. And it took them much longer. The dog hasn't made as much progress, but the dog's made some progress. So you've got two things there that can help your client. You've got a kind of like what they'll do if they do the best, and what they'll do if they just do the norm, the average. And we can tell the clients before they actually start goal setting, okay, I've worked with dogs like this before. I've worked with this dog. This dog took this amount of time. Their owners did this, this, and this, and they put this, this, and this effort into it, and they did this, this, and this. Not even going into the specifics, but I've had also other clients who couldn't have done all of those things, and they've got this, and explain the situation. So what we're doing is we're providing, how I said about the guess the weight jar before? We're providing, when you look and it says someone's put 3,000 sweets and someone's put 3, and you're kind of going, well, it's not 3,000, it's not 3. I think probably maybe 300. That's what we're doing, is we're providing the outside frame of reference so that our client are not going to go, oh, I think there's 6 billion sweets in that jar. Or I think there are no sweets in that jar. So framing is the way that we can kind of like say, okay, well, this is possible, and also this is normal, and this is how long it's going to take for the majority of people. And then say, so what do you want to achieve? Because what we're doing is we're helping them understand oh, right. Okay, well, I thought I would be able to achieve that because I was a complete novice and I was being a bit dumb and I'm under stress, and you also asked me on the spot. And it helps make better decisions when we frame things, and we give them kind of the parameters. So, in other words, don't ask people to set goals themselves just off the cuff. Frame it for them. Give them parameters. Give them a little bit of time to think about it. And don't ask them out of the blue. So, we're going to look shortly at a consultancy model that actually helps clients think better about where they are now and where they want to be. And it'll allow you to tackle any kind of crazy thinking along the way, but it helps them spit out a better estimate. So, these things can just help them estimate better, and then you don't get frustrated with them for being unreasonable and stupid. Um, so we also need to make sure as well that we're doing better risk assessments. So we do think our dog is never going to bite. I was working with a client the other day whose dog door dashes, and the dog twice has dashed out of the door and grabbed. One time they grabbed a little dog, I think it was a Yorkie, and the other time the dog had dashed out of the door and grabbed a cat. Um, so the dog is really reinforced because usually there are animals out there, and the dog is quite predatory, and but the owner said to me, the guardian said, I don't think my dog will ever kill anyone. Oh, she doesn't hurt, he doesn't hurt them, she doesn't hurt them. Well, okay. I think this situation is escalating, and I think that's really why you're here, because you're worried about it, and it's embarrassing, and you don't, and you are worried. But people really do think that it's never going to happen to them, that their dog is never going to kill another dog, or that their dog is never going to kill another cat or whatever. So we'd kind of done a little bit of risk assessment and so on, and put a little bit of management in place. But for me, I'd have 4 knocks because we'll talk about pessimism bias. I'm pessimistic because I've seen these things a million times and seen what's failed. So what she'd done is she put an X pen around the door, kind of like, because she didn't have a porch, and it wasn't very secure, and it wasn't attached to a wall or to the floor in any way. So if the dog had knocked it, if the dog had wanted to, the thing would have fallen over and she'd have been out, straight out. So I wasn't happy with the risk assessment and the management that they put into place. Um, and I also go with Mike Shikashio's 2 barrier thing. So, he talks about having a lead and a muzzle, or a lead and a bite suit, or a muzzle and a bite suit, or a lead and a barrier, and I'm kind of like, because I'm so pessimistic, I've got 3 or 4. So, I want those layers in place. And I'm aware that my pessimistic biases are bashing up, are clashing with the client's, oh, it'll never happen to us bias. But what we did is I did a risk assessment with them. It was very much paper exercise, and I got them to fill it in, and we were talking, it's very clear on examples and so on. Very happy to share this risk assessment with you. And there's also ones for frustration and impulse control and so on. But I also do like a lot of troubleshooting. So I get them to imagine the worst things that could happen when it's going to go wrong. I get them to imagine all of the things, like, oh, okay, so I'm not going to be paying as much attention when I'm doing something else, or when the kids are coming in from school, or where X has happened and Y has happened, or I'm having a senior moment, or whatever. And I get them to write them all down, and those I get them to kind of like just do the just imagine the worst case. What would happen? When would this go wrong? When does this go wrong? When does this fail? And get them to think about all of the times, and we're just framing it again so that they are actually putting themselves in that situation where they can imagine it failing. And that helps as well to make clients more realistic and to kind of challenge that situation. So, just because we're really bad at having realistic expectations, and when we've got no frame of reference, and we're also really optimistic about our dogs will never be and we will never be a statistic, it doesn't mean that our brains aren't also stupidly pessimistic. Mostly I see this in clients who've been through a number of trainers, or whose dogs have bitten and they've lost trust in them. So clients who come to me and they say, I've seen 4 other trainers and nobody's been able to help me with this. They're already pessimistic. They already think that nothing can work. Or clients that say, I've tried everything. They really think there's no hope for them. And I think sometimes learned helplessness is a real issue for some people, and it can be really difficult to motivate people who just kind of like they've learned that nothing has worked. None of their attempts to do anything have made any difference, and they've just become helpless and kind of a bit shut down as a result. If they've been in a long time in the mire, then learned helplessness is going to be a real problem for them. So we're afraid to start, we make excuses about why we won't be doing it today. How many excuses have I made about, I'm not starting a diet today, it's going to be a really bad day. We put things off, we say it's the wrong time, we've got a gazillion reasons why we can't start today. And this is going to be worse if you overface your clients with stuff to do. So I work with dogs who've got multiple complex issues. I work with an old arthritic old shepherd who was aggressive to strangers. He was territorial. He'd bitten the vet, and yet he's got massive separation anxiety. And what the client wanted to work with was the separation anxiety. And you're like, my normal solutions are going to be doggy daycare and having a dog sitter in. Well, how does that work when the dog's really aggressive to strangers? Um, so, you know, even though I kind of like only work and I really only do with really complex cases, my plans have only ever got 2 or 3 things to do a week, maybe 4 maximum. I think I once broke my thing and did 5. And I try to stick to two pages maximum. And I try to make sure that they've got videos and different modes of learning in there as well. Because I see trainers who are kind of issuing 9 or 10 pages. So when I go to a client and they say, okay, well, I've seen 4 trainers before, and I'm looking at the trainers I've seen and thinking these are good trainers. These are people who I like and trust. And I'm looking at the plans that they put together, and they're 9 or 10 pages long. Add enrichment, manage the environment better, remove all the walks, add sniff ARIs, put them look at that in there, give them 59 vet tests, and then send the dog back for 59 more if the results don't show any kind of cause. And I'm spending hours and hours wading through things that they've written about breed and socialization histories and causes without any thinking about, okay, well, what's the solution? I think we do this, I'd argue, because we don't have confidence in our own abilities and in what will work. And we're basically just throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping that some of it will stick. So if you've got pessimistic clients, the last thing they need is 10 pages of a complete lifestyle change because you haven't done a proper diagnosis and you don't know exactly what's wrong. If you've got optimistic clients, congratulations, because this is the best way to turn them into pessimistic clients is to give them 9 or 10 pages, because they're going to think that they can never improve. So these things that we can think about with our pessimistic clients, tackling that pessimism bias, we've got to do excellent information gathering. We really need to be able to pinpoint very precisely what the problem is and what will change. What small cornerstone foundation habit we can put into place will make an absolute real difference for these people and their dog's life in a very, very simple way. Because if we're not doing that, if we're throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping that something will stick because we don't really know, we need to spend more time finding out what it is in order to be able to say, this will make a difference, because otherwise we're just repeating the same mistakes that those other trainers have made. But we've got this, we're dog trainers, we know all about this. Get the diagnosis right. Dog behaviour isn't bound to the same degree by shadow side issues and system ones and so on as human behaviour. At least we can see the shadows, Dogs don't do covert. They're not mired in shame and embarrassment or pride to the same degree as humans are, that stops us being honest and, interferes with the progress that we're making. It means as well that accurate information gathering is really important, and many of us find this hard because, we're this is our shadow side. We're conscientious enthusiasts. We don't want to charge 5 hours of information gathering. We want to get right to, we want to give them solutions straight away. And that's why we end up throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something will stick. Put them on CBD or get them doing some zoopharmacognosis, get them doing this. Just like, oh my God, it's so overwhelming because we didn't know what would work and we didn't really understand what the problem was. And we moan all the time about how there's no magic pill, but sometimes there really are magic pills. I've got my alert barking protocol. It hasn't failed me yet. If I could stop an alert barker in 3 days, like even a hardened barker with this protocol, it's brilliant. It's really simple. And we want some easy wins for our clients, our pessimistic clients. And there are easy wins in reinforcement-based training. You know, Gene Donaldson's bar is open, bar is closed. It's so much easier for pessimistic clients than bat or look at that. Um, or we refuse sometimes, I think, with pessimistic clients to take over and step in. Like, we don't approve of boot camp, do we? And we don't like to think that we're doing it for the client, even though we're kind of saying, do this. Which is weird. It's this kind of weird cognitive dissonance we've got going on. But I do think there's times when should step in with a pessimistic client. So just to give you an example, I've got a client she's really anxious, she's really sweet, but she's also really anxious. And she was really struggling with her dog, who is also really anxious. I think there's a correlation. We were going out into public and we were doing look at that. We were just we weren't doing look at that. We were doing bar is open, bar is closed, and she was struggling. Like, how can you struggle with this? It's not hard. So I'm kind of like then getting angry with her because she can't do it. Why? Because she's under stress and she's feeling anxious. So am I going to let her make mistakes with her own dog, who is also really anxious? No. What I did was I gave her my dog, who knows bar is open, bar is closed, like so well. He's just like, yes, fine. There's a thing. He's a dog. As soon as he hears a car coming, now my old girl Flicker, she liked chasing cars, so we did a bit of counter conditioning. We just did bar is open, bar is closed. It was fine with cars, to stop her chasing cars. And he walked with Flicker. You always walk with her. So he got to know, oh, when a car comes, bar is open. When a car goes, bar is closed. And so he got really good at this, even though it wasn't for him. So he's a master, he's a genius of knowing when I'm playing this game. And he's really savvy about it. So I took her dog, who is anxious, and because I know I can, bar is open, bar is closed, I'm getting that dog looking back at me within 2 or 3 trials because we're doing it right. And my dog Heston, he's like there going, this is lovely, I'm just getting biscuits for no reason. So she's trying these things out with an experienced dog, and her dog's trying these things out with an experienced trainer. And I think sometimes we can be really scared to step in with pessimistic clients who are in a state of learned helplessness, to actually show them and make it easier with them, to kind of move forward. So I don't want my pessimistic clients trialing with a novice dog. I want them practicing on a well-prepared dog who knows what they're doing. And many times we've got the two novices. We've got a novice dog and a novice owner, and we're giving them the most difficult things for them to do when we should be picking off the small wins. So I think we also need to understand that change is hard. Really famous experiment where they took rodent species, a prey species, and they put it into a new environment for 5 days, and then they introduced a predator. And they also ran a parallel experiment where they put the prey species into the novel environment at the same time as predator. And what they found was a better survival rate for the ones who'd been in that environment for 5 days. So we know that changing environment, changing our habits, any kind of change is biologically hardwired to be uncomfortable and to be difficult and to be challenging, and for us to resist change. I can't tell you the number of people I've worked with who resisted changing, and hate change, even though it would have made life better for them, because the status quo, being in that environment for 5 days and this being our new habit, actually makes us comfortable and it makes us better able to survive. So people don't like change. That's the general state of affairs. Going back to that Seth Godin, what we need to think about is that people will resist change as hard as they can. There's a game that I played when I used to work a lot with teachers about change, to show them how hard change is. And I love this game. I would never do it with you because, most people are not teachers, and teachers tend to like doing drama stuff and don't whinge about it quite as much as normal people. So the game that I played was this. I got them all to stand up and find a partner, and immediately kind of going like, well, someone I don't know, how weird that would be. And I would say, okay, you're going to turn your back on each other for 30 seconds and change 5 things about your appearance. Okay, so they would do that. And every single person takes stuff off. They put their glasses on their head. They take their hair bobbles out. They take their scarves off. They take their cardigans off. They put their bags down. You know, they're taking stuff off. That's the first thing that we do when we are asked to change. And then they turn back, which is fine, and I say, okay, recognise the changes that your partner's made, and that's fine. And then I say, okay, we're going to do it again. Oh, what? Because I've already started to put back the changes that they'd made. Then people start picking things up. So they'll start picking their bags up. They'll get a coffee cup. They'll put a they'll put a pen behind their ear. They'll find a scarf that somebody else has left, and they'll put the scarf on. They'll put their shoes on different feet. So they start being a bit experimental. And you'll also have innovators, because there's always innovators. Often dog trainers tend to be innovators. Who will lead the way, and they'll start doing something a little bit weird, like they might put a cup on their head, or they might put the cardigan on backwards, and they'll start doing something really quite inventive and novel, which is cool. And then you get them to turn back again, and that's fine, and they recognise the changes, and then you say, because now they're into it, now they realise that change is not a threat, this is just a game, it's silly, it's fun. And also social peers, they've seen what their colleagues are doing, and they then start to innovate themselves as well. So the third time you do it, this is where crazy things happen. And people start to do the craziest of things, like they'll find a chair and they'll be using the chair as some kind of necklace, or they'll find a pencil case and they'll be using now the pencil case as a hat. So people do crazy fun things on the third time. And then you tell them the game is over and well done, and everyone's relieved that they don't have to do any more change, and everyone is happy that you're not picking them anymore, and they don't have to work with weird people that they don't know. And they put everything back in the way that it was, because that's what happens when the pressure comes off, when the foot comes off the accelerator with change, is we go back to the things that we were doing in the first place. And there's a lesson in there. The first lesson is this is an artificial situation. Of course it is. And of course nobody wants to wear the cardigan backwards for the rest of their lives, so of course they're going to put the cardigan on the right way. Nobody can spend the rest of the seminar with a chair as a necklace, so it's natural that they're going to make some changes back. And that's fine. But I do think, and that is our lesson, is that people, when we ask them to change back, or when we say okay, this is over, we've accomplished what we needed to, then they start reversing all the things that they've done. So we need to be mindful of that as dog trainers, that there's going to be a bounce back when people have made changes, and that they're just going to go back to the way that they were doing things before. The other thing is that there are also limits. I've never yet seen a group where anybody has taken a wedding ring off. They just don't. And it's a really easy thing that they could do, is to take the wedding ring off or put it on a different finger, and they never do. Because that's about our values. Also, never yet have I done this in a group where people have got naked. Because, there are social constraints that stop us doing certain things and going too far. If I played this game, I would also feel, I know these things. People don't do things according to their certain values. So we need to bear that in mind as well, that those shadow side values, you see, the shadow side is not always bad. Shadow side can be the values about marriage and all kinds of things and commitments. But there are certain things that people just will not do, because it just goes against their very nature. And if I say, before we do this exercise, some of you are going to feel uncomfortable moving your wedding ring to a different finger, just do it. It's just a small thing, it's no big deal. It's not saying that you've not got any commitment. As soon as I mention you may want to change your wedding ring, people then actually start doing it. So there are ways and means that we can do these things, but change is stressful. Change is hard. Undoing habits is actually an extinction process. So because you're not getting a reinforcement for the things that you used to do that got you reinforcement in the past. So we need to understand that habits are reinforcing in some way. Just, it may be a very bad habit, maybe complete stereotypical behaviour, but it's reinforcing in some way. So when we ask people to change the behaviour, we have to know that they're not getting the same reinforcement that they were getting previously. So if I stop using the fridge as a crutch for my emotional needs, I need to have another way to get my needs met. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going to the fridge. Okay, so habits are going to suffer from extinction processes just the same as habits do, changing behavior does with an animal. And we need to make sure that we plan that in. And we also need to know that when we're taking away reinforcements, which we are, when we're asking people to change behaviours, even if it's a stupid habit, they've been using a choke chain, for instance, or they've been using a shock collar. If we take that off them, we've got to provide a differential reinforcement. We've got to find something else that they can do easily that is going to meet that same need. So if they're using a shock collar, if you're using a choke chain because their dog is pulling on the lead, we know that if we take the choke chain off and the person isn't getting reinforcement, that they're going to find it really easy to revert to a choke chain if the thing that we give them doesn't succeed. And we also know, well, a harness isn't going to stop a dog pulling unless it's like an easy pull harness, and we don't want to use them. So we know we're taking away reinforcement. We've got to put a structure in there to support the client while they're learning the new thing. Otherwise, they're never going to embed it. They're never going to embed it. They're going to be like me, just going back to the fridge because it's easy. So we've got to understand these things. We also have to understand that extinction processes are uncomfortable. And we also have to understand that extinction processes, other behaviours can pop out. I might stop going to the fridge, but then I might start smoking that's been a crutch in the past. So if I go on a diet and I don't know, say for instance, I wire my fridge up to an electric shock, so that every time I go near it, it gives me a shock. Well, I might then start smoking because it's stressful and change is stressful. Or also maybe I've thought that in the past that smoking has helped me manage my weight. It didn't. But, stress, what do I do when we're under stress is go back to habits that have worked for us in the past. And it's the exact same thing with dog training. The other thing about extinction processes is it really makes you really angry. It makes you aggressive, and we have redirected aggression. So if you've got clients who are finding the process stressful and are yelling at you, that's part of the process. And I think we always need to understand that the consequences, these extinction bursts for dogs, we're going to get those with people when we're asking them to change the habit. And if we don't remove the reinforcers that have been there before and provide them with a different route to get those same reinforcers, so they want the dog to walk nicely on the lead, that they need that. If we're not providing a structure to help them get that, then they're just going to go back to what they were doing. And that's just the nature of change and the nature of human beings. Also, I don't think we plan very carefully when we are planning to coach clients through the difficult bits, the tricky bits. So you and we all know the difficult thing for a dog to do is generalize because they're very contextual learners. So they sit in the context of their home. And then the owners are going, well, they won't do it when we're out and about. No, because not. And then you're going, because dogs are contextual learners, they don't generalize easily, blah, blah, blah. So why then are we doing the support on the times that are easy and leaving the client naked and vulnerable and a novice and there's times that is hard? Because that to me just doesn't make sense. So we're doing that. Okay, bring your dog to my centre, bring your dog to my garden, bring your dog, I will come to your house. We're teaching the dog in a familiar context to do the new thing. And then we're going away and leaving the client to do the next step themselves, naked and vulnerable and unprepared, and novices, 2 novices together, a novice dog, a novice guardian. It just doesn't make sense. So one of the things I think that worked particularly well in lockdown is lots of dog trainers switched to a blended learning mode. And that meant, I would send my clients a video. Okay, this is how you teach hand touch. Teach this in your home. And then I'm going to come out where you don't need all the information anymore, and I'm going to work with you because I can then work at a distance and we're in mass and whatever. We can then do it out in public, but I'm actually there at the support bit when they need me to be, when it's likely to fail, because we know that dogs don't generalise easily. So, and humans too, we think that monkeys are better at it and apes are better at it even still, and humans are the best at it. We're very good at learning things in and applying it to different contexts. We're not brilliant at it, you know, it's not a strength. We're also contextual and find it hard to generalize sometimes. So I think with our pessimistic clients, we can actually make it better by giving them support in the home when they might need it, and that might not be with us there if we're trying to give them an economic package, but to be there the second time they do it, or the difficult bit. So I've got a client who has spent 3 weeks, she's got a dog who was very reactive to human beings when the dog's out on a walk, and that's fine. So I'd given her 3 weeks of decompression, you know, lots of free work in the garden, that kind of stuff. It's just fine, it's easy. And she's done really well, refrained from walking the dog out in public for 3 weeks, or just taking them out at times when there's no people around and use people to go in front of her and so on. She's done all of that. And she's actually been training the dog, the hand touch, the 1, 2, 3 drop. We've done Liz and McDavid's pattern games. We've been practicing these things in the home, and I haven't been there. I've just given her a video. She sent me a video back. I've given her feedback on the video. We're ready. But when we take it out into the real world, I know that's where the dog is going to struggle, and I know that's where she's going to struggle. I don't want her to be doing that naked and vulnerable, you know? I want to be there when she's there to do that with her. So those are some things that can help us with our pessimistic clients, is just understanding that change is stressful, knowing, and also our optimistic clients, that knowing that change is stressful, knowing that we undo habits the moment we think the other person isn't looking, unless it becomes embedded, unless it's just who we are. You know, I'm not a smoker anymore. That is a habit I don't have. So we do change. We change all of the time. I'm not the same person that I was. But undoing habits is hard, and we need it to be a lifestyle thing. We need it to be who they are, not just what they're doing. And we need to coach clients better in the critical bits. So we can also harness better the shadow side by thinking about, what do people really want? And this sounds really dumb. So I get a lot of clients who come to me from the protection sports world because, in their words, it's a phrase they always use: I've been kicked out of club. And what this generally means is the dog doesn't have a bite under stimulus control, so they're just biting willy-nilly, or they're biting, you know, because of emotional reasons, like anger and rage and excitement and so on. But because the dog doesn't have it under stimulus control, they get kicked out of club. Because you can't just take a dog that's just biting everyone to protection, sports and obedience clubs. Now, I look at these clients and I have an emotional reaction to them, because they come from worlds where they use whips, they use chains to whip the dogs, they tie dogs to upside down tables and just, you know, do run shock collars and prong collars, and they're all part of the course in this world. It's not a world that I like, and I have an emotional reaction to them. So when I ask, what does this client who's coming to me really want? They're not going to say, you know, I want this or I want that. But you can, what does that person want? They want a dog that looks at them with devotion. That's what they want, is a dog who looks at them with devotion. Well, you know, I've got this. How do I get a dog to look at me with devotion? Well, bullying him and putting him in a corner and making him cower and cry is not going to get that. Food gets that, toys get that, a really strong bond gets that. So actually, the methods I've got to offer get them the thing that they want. They want a dog who is massively obedient. That's really easy with food. It's really easy with toys. It's not really easy with fear. And what they don't want is actually the dog cowering a corner. When I say to people, what do you really want? Well, no one is ever going to say, I want my dog to look at me and cower. No one is going to say, I want to look like a massive bully, please. Make me look like a real nasty piece of work. Make me look like an absolute, you know. And a guy came to me recently with a Cane Corso that had been kicked out of club, and that Cane Corso is a mess. That dog is terrified, and cowering. And every time the man stands up, the dog literally wets himself. And I said to the guy, you know, what do you want out of your relationship with your dog? and he cried. He just broke down, and he just went, not this. And he was making me a bit emotional talking about it. He was heartbroken at what he'd done. Um, and what happens is because you know, sometimes there are more complex shadow side issues going on there, things like peer pressure and culture and so on. But he wept. He didn't want this, and that happens virtually every time I have one of these protection sports guys. What do you want? I don't want this. You know, I want a bond. I want a dog who does that stargazer, looking up at, walks next to me to heel beautifully over miles, just looking at me adoringly. Well, I've had that from my Cocker Spaniel because I had a pig's ear in my pocket, you know? So it's easily won. It's easily done. Um, when we're looking at our clients who've got rescue dogs, and we can get frustrated with them because they want that super social dog. That's what they say they want. I want my dog to be a cafe society dog, to be able to go to dog. What do they really want? They want to succeed. They want to make a difference. Um, so you know, we can get really snotty about what people really want. When they're saying, I want this or I want that. I want my dog to work in perfect obedience to me, and I want them to stop biting when I tell them to stop biting. But what do you really want? Well, I want my dog to look like they're devoted to me, and I want the dog to be really obedient, i.e., I want my dog to be under stimulus control and do things when I ask them to. Um, what do you want from your rescue dog? Well, I want my dog to be super social. But what do you really want? I want to feel good that I've done a good thing for this dog. So, what people's motivations are is often not what they say they are when they're goal setting. And it brings me to the hypothesis of generosity, which I just love. It's from Brene Brown, from a book. I think it's Daring Greatly that it's in. And I love Brene Brown because she's just so, she reminds me of, you know, how crappy we can be. And I get a real Judge Judy moment on me sometimes. And the hypothesis of generosity stops me doing this. So the hypothesis of generosity is basically, what's the most generous assumption I can make about why this person has behaved in the way that they did? So I get people calling me at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning to say, I've got 9 feral cats. They're always feral. They're not feral because they've been feeding them and they're really, you know, whatever. You can see my hackles rising over them saying these things at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I'm like, how do you get my personal home number and you calling me at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning? And I can feel my hackles rising. And we're thinking, what's the most generous assumption I can make about why this person is ringing me? And actually, is they want help. They want to have a solution. They want to know that, you know, they're ringing a rescuer, a rescue association, a shelter, because they want owners for these cats. They want these cats to have a better life than the one they have currently. It's not what they're saying. What they're saying is, come and pick these cats up now before 9:30, otherwise I'll let them starve to death, or I'll take them in the field and lose them. You know, that's not what they're saying. What they're saying has nothing to do with what they actually want. And the hypothesis of generosity is humbled me so many times. So I had a client a few weeks ago, and she was very chatty on the phone, but she wouldn't commit to filling in the document. And it went 3 or 4 weeks where she'd not filled in my 17-page intake form. Now I like this form, and this form is really useful to me, and I love it. But I won't take a client on who's not filled it out because, you know, reasons, my own shadow side issues. And well, I was thinking to myself, what's the most generous reason I can have why this woman is spending all this time on the phone to me? Because I'm getting cross with her. She's not paid for this time, and I'm not answering the messages anymore. It's making me really cross with her and frustrated. Like, just fill in a fucking form. It's not that hard. Um, and I found myself getting cross with her. And what's the most generous assumption I can make about her behaviour? Well, she doesn't want to fill in the form. Well, why not? And I'm thinking, you know, mild things. Maybe she's got a tablet and it's really, really hard. Maybe she doesn't have a keyboard and it's time consuming. And I asked her. So I said, okay, so I need this intake form filled. Is there any way I can help you do that? And she said, well, yes, I'm dyslexic. And then didn't I feel shit? You know, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think of this. And when I think, I work with dyslexic students, I know how many people suffer from dyslexia, and how difficult it is. And she's, you know, displacement behaviours, because she feels uncomfortable and she didn't want to fill out a form. And then I'm kind of like, all right. Because even my most generous hypothesis that maybe she didn't have a keyboard wasn't even on a par with what it was. And then I had another one that just, yeah, all the time. So it's another lady, and she has filled in a form. She's typing me lots of messages, and I'm starting to feel my hackles rise again, because after the intake form, I asked them to commit to a virtual. I do the first sessions virtually, and I always have, and I will continue to post COVID, because I am still gathering information. And I don't want to drive 30 or 40 minutes. And often I'm working with aggressive dogs, and I don't want to drive 30 or 40 minutes and risk the dog biting me, because, you know, I'm not stupid. And I need to assess the dog virtually before I can do anything. So she's hesitating. And I'm kind of like, okay, this is annoying, because again, I'm not getting paid for it, and I've read the form and I know what's wrong with your dog and I want to start work with you, but you won't commit to a virtual interview. And I said to her, you know, because I do now, much better at it, is there a reason you won't commit to, we can't make a time to do this virtually? And she said, yeah, I'm partially deaf and I find it really hard to do things over the computer. And then again, didn't I feel absolutely like an absolute toad? Because I just thought what she wants is a face-to-face, because she finds it hard to lip read to support herself, or to move, because, you know, she's only partially deaf, so she just needs to stand on one side of me. And she can do that in real life, but she couldn't do it through a computer or over the phone. And so I just was like, okay, that's fine. Because me being really rigid and structured was actually causing problems for some of my clients. And I'm thinking, why are they being such arses? Why can't they just do X, Y, and Z? And actually, when they told me, I'm just like, oh God, I couldn't even be as generous as I needed to be. So it's like those times when, you know, you say, is there a reason you're being so shit? And then you find out that somebody in the family has just died. And it is no excuse. It's not to say it's an excuse for how they're behaving. There is no excuse for ringing someone on a personal landline at 8 o'clock in the morning to ask them to take your cats before 9:30, because otherwise you will take them in the field and lose them. There is no excuse for that. But the hypothesis of generosity does help us understand, okay, well, I can see why they've got into this situation. And it also helps us find solutions. So rather than me, you know, I could have said to the woman who phoned me at 8 o'clock in the morning, you're a terrible individual. Who does this? Who would threaten the lives of animals? Who would use emotional blackmail in this? You are a disgusting person. And you know what? I'll probably still have helped her anyway. So do we need to say the things that are on our mind when we're going to do something anyway? And I would say the hypothesis of generosity actually saves me a lot of time, because I just went, why is this woman ringing me at 8 o'clock in the morning? Because she needs help. Okay, well, I can't help today, but I'm going to offer some help tomorrow. So I'll say, okay, well, we can't do it today, but if we send somebody tomorrow with some cat cages, do you think you could put them in the cages and get them down to us? Oh yeah, that's absolutely fine. So it just took all of the steam out of it. It was brilliant. It's just lovely. And so the hypothesis of generosity, don't just hypothesize, is what I'm saying. Don't just give them reasons, and maybe somebody in their family has died. Ask them, is there a reason why? And often people will actually then say, especially if you've got a good working relationship, and I'll just, as we come to an end, I'll give you some ways that you can move that. The other thing that I do, though, is I tell people what they are. This is to do with consistency, and it's something I'm exploring in the next book. But, you know, when I say to people who I'm thinking, you know, for the guy with the Cane Corso that's cowering in the corner and wetting himself every time the guy stands up, I said to him, I can see you want a really good relationship with your dog. And because he did. That was why he was there with me. He wanted a better relationship with his dog. And what I'm doing there is I'm going to then start to recommend things to help him get a better relationship with his dog. And he's going to be with me because his behaviour is going to be consistent with that view that I hold of him, because that's how people behave. With the people with their rescue dogs who are, want to propose, you know, stupid things and want to take their dog to, I don't know, rock concerts with them and all kinds of stupid things that their dog just won't ever be able to handle, I can say, I can see you want to make a better life for this dog, and I can see that you also want to feel really proud. So when I'm doing this, I can also then think, okay, well, how can I reinforce them for the very small steps that they're going to take towards this, rather than sending them off in some strange other direction where they're just going to, you know, resort to what they were doing before. So for instance, if somebody with a cowering rescue dog wants to turn their dog into a super social butterfly, it's usually because they just want to stick it on Facebook and have everyone tell them how wonderful they are. So can I still do that? Yes, of course I can. I can stick them on my own personal, you know, our dog trainer page and say, look at these new people, and they're just newly invested and they've got a long journey to go. But how wonderful it is that they've started on it, and how wonderful that they care so much. How wonderful, how proud they're going to be of their dog. And I can still do the things with them that they want and give them the same access to reinforcers, just the same as I would do with any other individual that's learning. And I don't think we should underestimate that, you know, actually, we can think of our clients as sometimes being idiots or villains or whatever else, you know, other label that we want to think of them. But generally speaking, you know, people don't want these things. And also, we can shape their behaviour better by telling them the things that they are, and then recommending the things that are going to help them get to be better at that thing that, you know, maybe they've not even really thought that that's what they are. It's just a different way of working and a different way of framing things. So on the model that I'm kind of using with my clients, I'm going to be taking longer than just diving in. So the very first thing I do is I get the story. So getting a story involves letting them tell me what's been going on. Why did they want a dog? What kind of dogs have they had before? Who are these people? Let them tell me everything about it. How did they come to pick this dog? How did they come to be in the situation that they're in that caused them to ring me? And I just let them talk. And I'm listening. And I'm doing so without judgment, because it also helps them build a better and more realistic picture of their dog. So if I've got a person whose expectations are crazy for the dog that they've got, you know, the guy who's kind of also is wetting himself in the corner and he wants to have a wonderful relationship with his dog, well, I'm thinking to myself, you're never going to get that. That dog is going to hate you for the rest of its life. I need the client to understand that where the dog is now. And telling the story helps the client describe their dog as they are now. So if I say, so what's your dog doing? Well, every time I stand up, he wets himself. Okay, give me some examples of when this has happened. Okay, well, when I get out of the bed, he runs out of the room and he goes and cowers under the kitchen table. I'm actually getting him to realistically describe where he is now. And he's framing his own discussion. Rather than starting with, what do you want? If I start, well, where are you now? Then I'm getting them to frame, well, this is where I am now. It's not going to be realistic, is it, that in tomorrow morning the dog's going to wake up and be like, hello, I love you again. Because I've helped them tell the story better. So the other thing that we can do when they're telling the stories, we can be conscious of their blind spots, the things that they're not acknowledging. Like the guy wasn't really acknowledging his role in what he'd done to the dog. So saying, so how did this happen? Well, you know, I've been taking the dog to club and we'd use the shock collar and we'd use this and whipped him to get him into a down position with the lead and so on. And again, I'm helping him unpick how he'd got into this situation. And I can only recognise the blind spots when I've got rapport. So I can only tell, well, you know, all that you did there was just damage your relationship with your dog. I can only say that to them. I've only got the right to tell them that when we've got some rapport, when there's a relationship between us. So listening to the story often helps them get there. Then, and I might not, by the way, choose to talk about those blind spots right there. I might just be aware of them in the back of my head and kind of go, okay, well, what they're saying is incongruent with what's going on. So if they're describing this rescue dog that's cowering in the corner, you know, and just trembling and all of the time, and if they're saying, well, I want my dog to be a Cafe Society dog, Well, that's a massive blind spot. It's a huge blind spot. And I might not pick it up there and then if I don't have rapport with the person yet. Or if it's not the time, I might just park it and kind of come back to it later. So the third thing I do, and I do this usually within the first meeting, is I'm getting a story and I'm kind of picking up on the blind spots, the things that they're not paying attention to. And then we're also getting leverage. So what's in it for them? What's in it for the dog if they make a difference, if they do these things? And I think that sometimes we fail to ask that question, like, what will be different? What will be better? How will life be improved if you do these things? And that because we don't have leverage, we haven't got anything then to kind of work on it. They haven't really even thought about the reasons for changing or what will be the benefit of doing so. So after this, we then can start to and I usually do the possibilities at the end of the first session. And it might, with more simple cases, only take 20 minutes. But I've also worked with clients where it's taken us 4 hours to get to possibilities because the story has just been that long and convoluted. And they had a lot of feelings and emotions that we had to get through. So there was a case where it had taken 4 hours that involved a dog who'd attacked a teenager in the home. And talking to all of the family members and getting all of their stories and together and separately, and did take a long time. So it didn't, it was worth it though, because I could really get to the emotions behind it all. And there was a lot of unpacking that needed to happen there before we could even move on to the possibilities. But then there are other cases like the Springer I was working with that's just a bit, nervous of going out because, lockdown dog and the first dog that they've got, and also a working Springer from Working Lines. That only took 20 minutes. They loved the dog. It was really clear to see that they were really invested in it. We moved through the leverage, like, how will your life be better? How will the dog's life be better? 20 minutes. And the possibilities, what you're doing with the possibilities is like, what can you imagine? What would be how do you want it to be? What do you imagine life would be like if you make any changes, if you've invested in some behavior change? And it's just talking about what they imagine and how, and that might be a little bit ridiculous, and that's fine. It doesn't mean that it's going to translate into goals. It just means we're talking about what do you imagine, how do you imagine it could be? And so, for instance, I was talking to my friend about Liddy. We're going to go on a road tour across Europe in some distant future when COVID is no longer resting over us. And I'm just going, yeah, I imagine Liddy doing, not like those Pinterest and Tumblr posts that you see with people in with their delightful dogs, and they're in check shirts and they're walking through mountains and so on. It's never going to be Liddy. Well, and I just said, well, I could get a push chair and strap her into the push chair, and she could stick her head out and bark at stuff, and so even possibilities can be silly, but what it does is it gives you hope. So what I'm doing there, even though I'm imagining Liddy strapped into a pushchair, shouting at Italian people as I'm drinking coffee and eating pizza or whatever, I'm still imagining myself doing it, even if I'm being silly about it. And so the possibilities phase is really important with pessimists and pessimistic people and people who've lost confidence in what they're doing, and offering them hope. And at the end of that first session, I'd usually stop it after the possibilities, and usually give them something to do there and then that will be a small win, even if it's just something small like sticking baby gates up before the next time I get there or whatever. Something that I know will make a difference really quickly, because that's going to be self-reinforcing. That's going to help the pessimist move forward. It's going to give them faith in me. It's going to help them invest more in what we're doing. And it also, having a gap after the possibilities before we move on to the change agenda, which is where we goal set, allows me to gather all the resources that I need for the next time. So we usually then start the next time with the change agenda, which is goal setting. So that's where we'll say, I'm not talking about how we're going to get there. I do not care. I do not care how that will be achieved. But by that point, this should be much more realistic when we're setting goals about, well, what's achievable and what's the time scale. I don't even care about the minutiae yet, but what do we want to see? So really, I want to be able to see Liddy, for instance, going in a car through Europe, and enjoying some time out of the car and so on, and so on. So that's my aim for her. Short-term aim, being able to walk without getting upset by all of the pigeons. That was my last goal with her. So those are I don't even care. We're not putting a time limit on it. We're not saying how we'll get there. We're not saying what it will be, but we are setting a goal at that time. And we're also then gaining commitment. And there are two things that can really help you there, and they're really subtle and really smart. One is when you're doing a goal setting, do not write the goals for the client. Get them to write their goal, get them to decorate a piece of paper, get them to make a poster out of it. I don't even care. But get them to take charge of the writing of the goal. Otherwise, it's your goal, not theirs. So this comes from car salesmen of all people who get you to fill in the paperwork and your address and all of the things and fill in the documents. Because people then, in the past where they used to do it themselves, people would then come away and go, hey, what's this massive balloon payment I signed myself up for? So signing things themselves and writing things out themselves actually helps people have ownership of it. And that's really useful at the change part. Commitment is great as well when we do public commitments. So, maybe they're not going to stick it on their social media, but stick it on yours. It's like these people have signed up for this and they've committed to this. Because we're human beings and we are apes and we are very motivated by things like shame and embarrassment. And a public commitment to things helps. So that's why things, diet programs and all of these kind of like commitments to doing things for charity, they all involve a public commitment. So if you can, get a public commitment out of them. Get them to really sign up to something that you can hold them to and they can see themselves doing. And then in that second session, so usually I leave about 48 hours just for me to gather my resources, but sometimes it would be more, sometimes it might only be an afternoon. I'll do the session in the morning, we'll have lunch, and then I'll come back later. Or I'll do it online, have lunch, and then go and see the client in person. It just gives me time to think about the possible strategies. So we're not dumb enough to think that there's only one way to teach a drop, for instance. You don't have to resort to using punishment methods to teach drop, but there's still, 5 or 6 ways that I could teach drop that would achieve the same thing. I might be teaching a trade or a swap, or I might be doing the Chirag Patel method. There are lots of different ways I could teach it. And the same with the Springer client is a really good example. So we were talking about possible strategies because she's moving her dog out into the real world. And so I explained, okay, well, one method is bar is open, bar is closed. This is how this works. There's also bat, and there's also look at that. And there's also engage, disengage. So these are our four methods. This is how it works. Just give them a broad outlines. Sometimes I don't even give them 4. I will narrow their choices to maybe 2. So I might have thought, okay, well, I'm going to say bar is open, bar is closed, or engage, disengage. The reason I would only maybe give them 2 if I had 4 would be because too much choice is overwhelming. And for pessimistic clients or those who lack confidence, choosing between too many options is just too much. It's just overwhelming. Barry Schwartz writes about it quite a lot in his book. I can't remember the title of it, but it's about why too much choice is overwhelming, and especially if we're kind of in a position of learned helplessness. But I will also, in possible strategies, discuss, and I'm going to talk about this more in my next book. I will include discussing things that they've already used, like water sprays or choke chains or shock collars, things that I have no intention of them selecting. But in a possible strategies, we're talking about the benefits and the drawbacks of each method. Okay, so if I'm talking about, so bar is open, bar is closed, well, you know, it's easier than engage disengage, because you don't really have to be paying any attention to the dog or what's going on. You just have to be like feeding your dog, and all you have to do is just have your timing kind of roughly right. Whereas engage disengage, you need your dog to be able to disengage, and if you don't know that your dog is going to be able to do that, so we'll be explaining all of the kind of the tensions, the drawbacks, the difficulties, and so on. like I said to her, you know, I did, because I did put all four out. I said, look at that. It works really great. My dogs are brilliant to look at that. And it's really easy for me because I'm so lazy that they look at it and they come back and they tell me that they've seen it. And I just have to go, oh, all right then. You know, my dogs come and they, as soon as they hear a car, they come back and I don't ask them for a sit. I'm not bothered about a sit, but they come and they go, oh, there's a car. If I sit right now, Emma will give me a biscuit. So I love look at that because they're seeing the stuff in the environment and they know exactly how the game works and what to do. But I know it's not for everybody. So in the possible strategies, I will sometimes discuss strategies that they've already used and we'll talk about the consequences of them if I'm pretty sure, 99% sure that they wouldn't select it when I tell them about the fallout and they can already see that with their dog. So, I think that there are times and places where we can propose things that we have no intention of suggesting, of them using. And I think there are clear rules to that, which I'm explaining in the next book. But there are times when I'll discuss things that I'm not going to use, or have no intention of using, in order to help the client think those things over and make a conscious decision themselves not to select it, because this stops them later on using those things again. So I find that if I've had a conversation with someone about, okay, well, could you use the prong collar, for loose lead walking? Well, they've already known that actually this is causing, this hasn't worked. And that conscious discussion about it, and not only hasn't it worked, it's had fallout for me. I don't have a good recall with them anymore because as soon as I put the prong collar on, um, they're avoiding having the collar put on in the first place and they're running away. So, it's wrecking our relationship. I don't have a good recall anymore. I'm getting more and more cross with my dog. They're giving me all the 50,000 reasons they've got not to use that piece of equipment anymore. Whereas if I don't discuss it openly with them, sometimes what I find is they resort to using it because it kind of was working in the past. So I like to put these things on the table, and I find where people have been using equipment in the past, if I have a conscious discussion with them about it and about the consequences of using it, they tend not to use it again in the future. Whereas if we don't air those discussions, I find them creeping back to the things that they were doing in the past. So it is useful to discuss in the possible strategy stage things that you've no intention of using, just because it helps make it a more conscious, it takes it from the shadow side to being overt. And then they pick the thing that's going to work for them. So the Springer client yesterday, she decided that bars open would work best for her. We talked about the strategy, she's going out to do it, we talked about where to do it and so on, and I'm going to be there supporting her in that moment of doing it. And that's where we get to the plan. Now, a lot of us, because we're enthusiasts and because we've got all the solutions, we go straight into the plan. Here, do this. If I could save so much time, just do this. It would just take me 5 minutes. I would just say, okay, you need to do this, this, and this. Just do this. Here's a video. Go do it. I could give that advice in 5 minutes. And what I found is, it may be taking me an hour to get to the point where I'm planning, but I've got much better rapport with the client. The client is much more likely to implement it. It's their plan, it's their goal, it's a goal that they chose, albeit in very controlled kind of circumstances. It's their strategies to get to that goal, and I'm not doing the plan for them. They're writing the plan themselves, and they work out how. I show them how to. So I say, okay, you're going to write a 12-week plan, and this is how it's going to look. Can you write me the plan and send it me tomorrow? Rather than me saying, here's your plan. Because I've shifted from done to done with. And in fact, in their case, it's them doing it themselves. So that's my kind of model about how to use it and where to use it and why. So when I think back to what we said at the beginning, what you wanted out of the session, there may be things that I've not answered. There may be things that you want clarification on, and I'm absolutely fine to answer those questions privately and to continue those discussions. There may be things that you'll find answers to in my wonderful book, Client-Centered Dog Training, 30 Lessons to Get What You Want, to get maximum engagement, I should say, from your your clients. I'm also in the process of writing, about a quarter of the way through, a second one, which will be 50 conversations for dog trainers, 50 difficult conversations and how to win them. And you can also find more information on Muff Like to Meet. And I just started a very small but select group, and I'm fine with that. I don't want it to be for the masses. Client centered dog training group, where I'm going to be posting things fairly regularly about how to have better relationships with our clients, that might just give you a few tips and tricks, and expand also on the things that I've said in the book, and conversations that will go into the next book as well. So thank you very much for your time and for listening to me. Any questions at all, or any discussions that you want to have, I am perfectly available for those, and enjoy.